Here we go. Another episode of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And here we are, another week of craziness in the political scene. And we're going to start with the Trump trial. And there's a lot of moving parts in this, right?
Well, there are. And we should really call them the Trump trials because there's multiple trials going on in multiple jurisdictions across the country. In New York, the trial began this week with testimony from David Pecker from the National Enquirer about how he participated in the catch and kill with Trump on stories with Stormy Daniels and with the Playboy model and how that whole process worked. We're expecting a ruling on Trump violating the gag order that is likely not to go his way, and there to be monetary fines and the threat of jail if he continues to do that. That trial is continuing as we speak with additional testimony. None of it has been favorable to Trump so far. The big case was Thursday when the Supreme Court heard arguments for more than 2 hours about Trump's immunity. And frankly, the questions from the justices indicate that, they're going to try and reach some kind of mushy middle ground on this. So anybody who held a view that they would quickly and definitively resolve this, that he has no immunity whatsoever, are likely to be disappointed. It's likely to be that they'll find there are aspects of being president that you have immunity for. You're probably not immune from private acts, and he's accused of private acts related to January 6th and the documents. But they may send it back to the trial court for further findings of fact. Wow. And if that happens, that's going to delay the matter. But again, nobody really knows until we see what the justices do in their final opinion, which will come out and will be argued behind closed doors, and we'll see where it comes out. There is some thinking that he will not get what he's asking for in terms of immunity, but he will get a delay. And at this point in time, he considers that a victory.
Absolutely. Back to the New York trial a little bit. David Pecker clearly is their star witness. I think they came out of the box with their most important witness. He will negate any of the problems that jurors might have with Michael Cohen. Now, the question comes up, though, all of these things, which are obviously shady, but are they illegal?
It's apparently not illegal to claim that Ted Cruz's father was involved in the Kennedy assassination or that he has 5 love children like they did for Marco Rubio.
Right.
But it's illegal if you use campaign money for it and don't report it, or you do it to influence a political campaign. That's the bank shot that the prosecution has to make to link these misdemeanor offenses to a felony offense. And they're doing it on campaign law. That's going to be the hard part for the prosecution to prove the case, is that these actions, well, catch and kill is not per se illegal. Catch and kill, when you're doing it for purposes of falsifying financial records and then evading campaign reporting requirements, then it rises to a felony.
The problem is connecting those dots, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I think, though, the good part about this is all of this testimony is going out to the general public who are voters. And hopefully some of that alone will have an effect, maybe having people give him a second thought as to whether he's the right candidate.
When you realize that all of the stuff you read in the checkout counter in the National Enquirer about his opponents was manufactured nonsense, that should help you understand that a lot of what Trump says is manufactured nonsense. And we'll see if it has that impact on the voters, because it will be very tawdry what he engaged in, how he engaged in, how he did it. And it'll all be laid out there in the public.
Yeah, whether it's legal or not, it's going to be out there. Let's move to the college campuses and the Gaza protests that are going on all over the country. You seem to think that this is going to have a major effect on the Biden campaign.
I do. This is the silver bullet that's aimed at Biden's ability to win the election. And people who've sort of poo-pooed it, I think, are going to be proven wrong. These demonstrations are multiplying. Let's remember 1966, Ronald Reagan ran against the mess at Berkeley. We now have a mess at half a dozen elite campuses, and middle America is sitting there going, arrest, expel, and deport them. People are tired of this nonsense. People who are paying $70,000 a year to send their kids to these schools, want them to go to class and graduate. And it's important to know, too, these are not people protesting hunger in Palestine. These are people who are chanting, "We love Hamas, death to America." They are fully bought in on the Hamas agenda, and it can't be hidden anymore. It can't be pretended it's not there. And people as diverse as Charles Blow, an African-American columnist for the New York Times, even this morning, raised the specter that in Chicago at the convention, it's going to be 1968 all over again. Mm-hmm. And that has got truly devastating impacts for the Biden campaign. Now, both of these campaigns are, as we've said before, are in a race to the bottom in terms of how they're trying to appeal to voters and what they're doing to bring people together in America. But this is a devastating situation for Democrats that they've got to get a handle on because they're growing, they're getting out of hand. There is an organization behind this. There is a public relations campaign behind this. There's likely a foreign power involved behind this that is propagating and keeping these demonstrations going. They follow President Biden around. They followed him to Madison Square Garden for his big fundraiser. And there's no easy answer. When Joe Biden was confronted about this week, he said there are fine people on both sides. And two editorials picked up on this and said this was his "there's fine people on both sides on October 7th" moment, right. Which was, if you recall, Charlottesville was the reason Joe Biden says he decided to run. Well, now he's in that same morass. Very difficult for him to distinguish himself because he's trying to play both sides. Jim Hightower, who was a Texas Democrat, wrote a book. He said there's nothing in the middle of the road except yellow lines and dead armadillos. And Joe Biden is standing in the middle of the road.
There was another primary in Pennsylvania, which most people ignored because the candidates have been selected. But there are signs in these primaries that give an indication as to what could happen in November.
There are. Joe Biden got about 97% of the Democratic vote, so he is doing a much better job of consolidating Democrats. But Donald Trump only got about 82%. 16% of the voters in Pennsylvania voted for Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley pulled out of the campaign on March the 6th. 155,000 Pennsylvania Republicans voted for Nikki Haley 2 months after she's been out of the race as a expression of their displeasure with the candidacy of Donald Trump. To put that number in context, Biden won Pennsylvania by 87,000 votes. So that is a continued warning sign that the Trump campaign is not unifying the Republican Party, that there is a sizable block of suburban women Republicans and college-educated men who are not falling into line behind Donald Trump. And you cannot be a Republican candidate and lose 16% of the vote nationally and have a hope you're going to win.
But let's not get too excited because those votes don't necessarily transfer over to Biden because, as we've talked about many times on this program, the apathy aspect is higher than people getting motivated to vote for the other candidate.
Well, that's very true. In the last election, Joe Biden got the most votes ever cast for a president. Donald Trump got the second most votes ever cast for president. I'm pretty confident we're not going to have that situation this year. We're going to have a relatively low turnout election with a lot of dispirited voters on both sides. And who can get their voters out, how much leakage there is to third and fourth and fifth party candidates, and where do they come from is going to be critically important. It's an election nobody in America wants, and it's unfortunately the one they're going to get.
Third-party candidates and all of those factors will probably become more in focus the closer we get to November, wouldn't you say?
They will. Right now, there's a lot of speculation. Who does Robert F. Kennedy help or hurt? In some cases, it's jurisdictional. In some states, it's one candidate versus the other. Will his campaign sort of collapse of its own weight? A lot of third-party candidates do. Or will it expand? Will it become the vehicle for a protest vote by both Democrats and Republicans? What if Donald Trump is convicted of a crime but is not in jail? And what if the Hamas thing continues to erode Biden's support amongst young Democrats? You could have people voting for all kinds of people, Cornel West or some, Republican proxy that will seriously impact the results of the election.
It'll be interesting to watch. That's why we're here, right?
Right.
Finally, the Ukraine-Israeli package finally passed. And Mike Johnson seemed to step up to make sure it got through. He did some negotiating with Democrats and various people, and he got it through. What do you think happened here? Why did Mike Johnson suddenly get a backbone?
I think there's three reasons that Johnson became the leader that nobody really expected him to be. The first is, as Speaker of the House, he was invited into the SCIF, the secure place where they can do briefings at the White House or in the Situation Room, and was laid out to him in stark terms what will happen in Ukraine if they don't receive American military aid. And he made the choice. He did not want to be part of that debacle. The second thing is Mitch McConnell pulled him aside and had a long talk with him about the timing of things and said, I understand you're trying to manage the timing. The timing will not wait for this decision. And Mitch McConnell is a very wise person, and I think Johnson wisely took his advice. And the third thing is I think Mike Johnson is a legitimate person of faith who sat down on his knees and prayed about it and who rose to the leadership, who does have a moral compass and who understood the stakes that were at play here and summoned it within himself to do the right thing. And we should applaud and recognize, he did it under difficult political circumstances, but he did it. And that's what leadership is about.
And of course, MTG and the likes have not been happy about this, but there seems to be more pushback on her and those types than there ever has been before.
What we saw was a very simmering resentment amongst other House Republicans and amongst Republican voters generally, who said, enough of this nonsense. We're tired of this craziness. One columnist in the New York Times called them, and I quote, poo-fligging chaos monkeys. And I frankly can't think of a better description. So they have been now universally derided. Moscow Marjorie, a term coined by Ken Buck, the outgoing Republican conservative congressman from Colorado, is getting star treatment on Moscow television, by the way. But that's not going to really help her in any move to replace Speaker Johnson. The Republican caucus, the rest of them basically stood up and said, enough to this. Now, there are some danger signs. 14 of the far-right Republicans, including Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tom Massey and the others, voted against aid to Israel. They wouldn't even go there with Israel, which makes it very difficult to draw a distinction and a clear line if you're going to tag President Biden on being weak on Israel when these crazies, I call them the Putin Republicans, vote this way. They also voted against aid to Taiwan. Now, the other warning sign is 37 Democrats also voted against aid to Israel. And they were more than just the squad. That's a big danger sign in the Democratic Party, a big danger sign to Jewish voters and people in Israel. But nonetheless, let's give them the credit. Congress did the right thing in passing the package.
I think we covered it pretty well this week. There'll be more Trump fun next week, obviously, and we may know more on the immunity case. Anything else we need to look forward to?
Well, I will just give you a moment of zen. I found this quote today. Laura Thompson, who was a deputy mayor to Ed Koch back in the day when Koch was the mayor of New York, had this quote. I would not trust Donald Trump if his tongue were notarized. So there you go.
Oh, there you go.
It's been a long-standing issue.
Exactly. All right. That does it for another edition of Red versus Blue. Please subscribe on Spotify, and we're now available on YouTube. So if you're really inept at maneuvering around the internet, you can find us real easily on YouTube. There's a link on the Facebook page to the YouTube site, and we're also on a lot of different platforms. So please subscribe and leave comments, and good comments, of course. Only good comments. Thank you. And we'll see you again next week on Red versus Blue.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.